Hi, everybody. Greetings from rural Southeast Ireland. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to share my recipe for success with you. For anybody interested in learning how to eco-print in the dirty pot without using traditional powdered mordants. Now, some of you may know some of you may not. My name is Nicola Brown, and my whole focus in my textile practice is moving towards more sustainable methods. I'm a wet felter, an eco printer, and I love growing my own vegetation to use in the eco printing pot. So if you would like to drop a comment in at any stage, please do. Let us know your name and where you're tuning in from. And then I'm going to make a presentation, and afterwards I'm happy to answer your questions. So to keep things simple for me, if you do have a question about working in the dirty pot without powdered mordants, I'm going to ask you at certain stages to drop your question as a comment. But if you put 3 question marks in front of it and 3 question marks behind your question, that will make it easier for me to find them in the comments, because I'm here by myself and multitasking. So this is great to see. Maria is here. Maria, thank you so much for organizing this most amazing event. Lisa, hi to the UK, and hi, great to see you here too. So I'm going to be sharing 3 things with you today. I am going to be sharing the essential ingredients as I see them for success when you are working without using the traditional powdered mordants. And I would like to be clear, I am not against people using powdered mordants, so please don't think that. But there are health and environmental implications of using them. And what I like to do is do things in a simple, organic, intuitive fashion. And that's why I choose myself to work without the mordants. There are wonderful advantages, but there are also disadvantages. So I'm going to give you a simple recipe for success. I'm going to share how to set up your dirty pot. I'm going to go through each of these little points here with you. I am going to go through the eco printing process as I use it. And I would like to be clear, just to say that when I am talking about eco printing without powdered mordants, this does not mean that what you create and what you print will not be washable. It means that you end up working with less vegetation than you would if you were using mordants to fix the color. But everything that you create will be fully washable, color fast, as much as any natural dyeing or any eco printing is color fast. And I wash everything, all my own garments and all my own accessories that I make in my washing machine afterwards. So I will just tell you how I care for them. But I have a piece here just to show you. I was actually going to wear it today, and when I put it on, I was too hot. So this is a wool silk blend top that I made. I eco-printed the fabric, and then I combined it with plain fabric of the same sort. It's 25% silk, 75% wool, so a little bit warm for the day we're having here in Ireland. But I have no problem washing this in my washing machine, and it's a combination of plain and patterned fabric. But if I have eco-printed in the dirty pot correctly, the dye inherent in the eco-printed fabric is not going to discolor or taint the plain fabric. I also wash all my luxury things in the machine. This here is a cashmere scarf or wrap, a lovely, beautiful, big piece of cashmere that my good friend Diane Ferguson in America gave me as a gift. And I actually eco-printed that in a cast iron pot. Again, I have no problems washing that in my washing machine. So I will give you information afterwards about how I care for my fabric. So let's just get started. And here I have written the essential ingredients for success, and I'm going to go through them one by one. So many of you, if not all of you, understand that a mordant is a powdered metal salt such as potassium alum sulfate, ferrous sulfate, copper sulfate, alum acetate, etc., etc. And with natural dyeing, using traditional methods, you would prepare the fabric that you want to receive the color by making a solution of your mordant based on the weight of fabric and the weight of fiber and the quantity. There would be a recommended percentage of mordant to use. And when you prepare your fabric correctly, what happens is your fabric is chemically altered. So if you then subsequently wash your fabric, that mordant is fixed into the fabric, and that's what helps make the colors bite on the fabric. It's what makes the fabric washable and colourfast afterwards. But when we are working without the traditional powdered mordants, what I like to use is a reactive pot. And so that's the first of the principles that I employ. So a reactive pot is not stainless steel. It is not glass. It is something like aluminium or cast iron. It could be copper, but it's a metal that will have a reaction with what goes into the pot. And as somebody new to eco printing without traditional powdered mordants, I cannot emphasize this enough. The pot I suggest you start with is an aluminium pot. It's going to give you the best and most consistent results time after time. I like then to have a chunk of rusty metal in my pot, and I also use rusty metal, or it doesn't actually have to be metal. If it's iron, it could be cast iron that's not rusty, but I like to use iron pipes to roll my bundles on, or copper pipes, and they cause a reaction as well with the fabric. But I definitely like a chunk of rusty metal in my pot. And as I said, I'm going to share with you how I make my dirty pot. I'll do that in a minute. Then the next thing you're going to need is fabric. And that fabric needs to have been prepared correctly. It also needs to be specific fabric to get specific results. So if you're new to eco printing without powdered mordants, it is false economy to try and print on cotton and cellulose fabric at the beginning without having done some experiments on wool or silk. And my top recommendation for you would be wool. And if you are a felt maker, this is great news. Wool takes the natural dye color in the dirty pot absolutely wonderfully. So I recommend wool or handmade felt. I recommend silk. It's important, I feel, at the beginning to have success, because if you don't have success, if you don't understand the basics, you have no foundation to move on from. And there is so much information available on the internet freely, which is a wonderful thing, but it also can be overwhelming. So what I'm sharing with you today, I can guarantee if you do exactly as I share and I tell you, and I'm going to be sharing the process, I can guarantee you will get good results. But if you deviate even slightly, you are adding in elements that may not give you such good results. So with your fabric, I recommend that you work with either wool or silk. And if you're on a budget, just see, have you got any old wool blankets hanging around anywhere? Do your friends have them? Can you pick up what we in Ireland call a jumper, a wool jumper from a thrift store, an op shop, secondhand shop? You may call that a sweater. So just have some wool. That would be my top recommendation. Then you're going to need a heat source that can maintain a boil for long periods of time. So that is another difference between working with and without mordants. When I'm working in the dirty pot, while I do steam for some specific results, That's a little bit further on. With the absolute basics, you will be submerging your bundles into the pot liquid, and you need them to be fully submerged, and you need to process for longer than if you had used mordants on the fabric. It's just the nature of the process. The pot is acting as a mordant, and so is any rusty metal you put in, but it's a slower process than using that measured quantity of powdered mordant. So you need a pot that will keep your water bubbling, not just steam coming off it. You want little bubbles. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to need some sort of string to tie around your bundle. Obviously, you're going to need scissors and maybe a towel for your hands, but you're going to need some string. And I like to use t-shirt yarn. Then you're going to need some vinegar. And the vinegar is used to help sharpen colors. It's not a mordant, but it is a modifier. So a modifier, if I soak my wool fabric in a vinegar solution, or I sprinkle vinegar onto the fabric, if I then washed the fabric, that vinegar would wash out. If I leave the vinegar in the fabric when I'm eco-printing, I can get all sorts of subtle effects in the background color. And I'm all about a simple process using limited vegetation and getting interesting effects. So don't forget vinegar. It can be any sort of vinegar. It can be white, it can be malt, it can be red wine vinegar. I've even on occasion in Portugal used first crop grape wine that was so acidic they weren't able to drink it, and instead they made it into vinegar. So you can use vinegar, but please do not confuse this with using lemon juice, which is also acidic. Lemon juice will actually bleach color from your pieces. So you need vinegar and you need suitable vegetation. This is really important. If you are coming from a background of using mordants, or if you've seen all the absolutely fantastic pieces that are A, on different online groups, but B, that are being opened and bundles that are being revealed as part of this Global Botanical Print Day. I mean, you may say, oh, wow, I have sumac in my garden. Well, I have sumac, and sumac does not give me results in the dirty pot. So you need to be clear that not everything you see online is going to give you good results when you start to work using the pot as mordant. So what I recommend, if you would like to try this as a process, I recommend that you start with something that I can guarantee 100% is going to give you good results, and that is onion skins. Now, you may think they're not very glamorous, but we all have access to them in our kitchen, in local markets, etc., etc. So you're looking for that papery outside of what we call brown onions, but some of you might call them yellow onions. Also, the papery outside of red onions works, but I have not got successful eco prints from the papery outside of white onions. Shallots, you may say shallots, I think, if you live in America possibly, or Canada, we say shallot. Shallots can sometimes give faint prints, but they don't give very strong prints. So I recommend those brown or yellowy brown onion skins or red onion skins, and they will give you good results. So in fact, I might just show you what I'm sitting on, just so you can see. So this cushion here, this is lamb's wool fabric that I had woven for me locally in my local woolen mill. This was printed in an aluminium pot, and you can see that the prints are really strong on that. That's fully machine washable. I have a zip on the cover, so I can pop that in my washing machine anytime I like. So I'm going to add this back into the stream again, and I'm going to move forward. As I say, I will answer questions afterwards, so you can be thinking about them now. Just don't drop them in as a comment now. So this is the second slide. So this is setting up the dirty pot, and these are the things that I would say are the essential ingredients for success for those of you deciding to give this a try. You want an aluminium, or you might say aluminum pot. You want a chunk of rusty metal, I'm not talking about 5 nails. I'm talking about something like a couple of horseshoes, an old iron, a big spanner. It doesn't actually have to be rusty. It just needs to have the potential for rust. It will still work even if it's not rusty, but it will rust very quickly in the pot. So I recommend that you half fill your aluminium pot with water, and then you add at least a pint or half a litre of vinegar. Any sort of vinegar will do. And you have the option of adding some eucalyptus leaves and bark. I do that because I like getting complex background color. And there is also the option of adding onion skins, which I love doing because they have marvelous natural dye. But I usually only add them after I've made the dirty pot liquid up and after I start using the dirty pot. So you boil this for 1 hour. If this is the first time you're making this, you boil it for 1 hour and then it's ready to use. It won't look very black at that stage, but you could prepare this one day and just turn the heat off, and you could leave it for a little while before you use it, because there's no need. It's not a race. You don't have to do everything on the one day. However, if you decide to do that and make your liquid on one day and maybe prepare your fabric, then what you need to do is, I recommend, unless your pot is a heavy duty commercial one, like my bigger aluminium pot. My aluminium pot has, the sides of it are 6 millimeters thick. It's so 6 millimeters is quarter of an inch, maybe a little bit more. The regular sort of domestic and cooking pots are not suitable to leave that liquid in for an extended period of time, only overnight maybe, because what you will discover is the vinegar in the dirty pot combined with that rusty metal and combined with the aluminium of the pot itself, that will lead to you putting holes in the wall of your pot. So if your pot is a thin-walled pot and you're making a new dirty pot and you're leaving it for another day, I recommend you just then, when the liquid cools down, you decant it into a big tub and you just swill out your pot, and you then put the liquid back into it when you're ready to print. You don't have to have the pot looking really clean inside. As you can see from that image in the middle there, the aluminium sides of mine look very black. Staining is absolutely fine. That's not an issue. So don't think it has to look lovely and shiny. It doesn't. And the other thing is, I reuse that pot liquid for months and months and months on end. So I'm not throwing out that dirty pot liquid every day. Then the eco printing process, which I'm going to take you through step by step. The first thing that you need to do is you need to prepare your fabric. And as I say, if you're new to this, I highly recommend wool, handmade felt, or silk. So something that's coming from an animal base. You could also use cashmere, mohair, yak, quivet. But let's just say it's wool or it is silk. So I prepare my fabric, even if it is fabric that has been sold to me as prepared for dyeing. I think this is really important. Regardless of where the fabric came from, I give it a really, really good wash using an olive oil soap. Now, if you are a felt maker, you can use any soap that you already use for felt making, a gentle soap. But I like to use something with no artificial colors and no artificial scents in it. And in America, Dr. Bonner's would be a good alternative to the olive oil soap. But I batch wash my pieces in the washing machine. And people may say, "Oh, you wash your wool or your silk in the machine, and what happens? Will it shrink?" First of all, if it's handmade felt, I also wash my own handmade felt subsequently in the machine. If you have felted it correctly, there shouldn't be any more shrinkage. So that's the first thing. I have a modern machine that doesn't use too much water, and it is very good. It has a 40-degree wool wash, but I could also wash the pieces by hand, or I could turn the temperature down to 30 or 20. But when you're preparing your fabric, if you have an old woolen blanket, I would say put it through on the wool wash. You want any shrinkage that is potentially might occur. You want that to occur before you eco print, and you want to be able to use your pieces afterwards. Aside from art pieces, which clearly are non-functional, anything that's functional, I want to be able to give it hard use afterwards and have no issues maintaining it. So I say give it a wash either by hand or in your washing machine using an olive oil soap beforehand. And then I recommend that you soak your fabric either in plain water overnight before your eco printing session, or you can soak it in a combination of vinegar and water. Now, it doesn't matter which you do, but if I soak it in plain water, I'm going to sprinkle the felt or the wool or the silk with vinegar before I lay the leaves. If I soak it in vinegar water, I don't need to do that. And if you are wondering how much vinegar, I would say anything from 25% vinegar up to full strength vinegar for an overnight soak. But in Ireland, it's not so easy to get inexpensive vinegar locally. It sounds bizarre. So I usually soak now overnight in water, and then I sprinkle my pieces with vinegar before I lay the vegetation out. And after I've gone through these slides, I am going to share just a few slides of me actually doing a piece so that you can see the whole process. So the next thing I would do is I would gather the vegetation. And when you're gathering vegetation, be mindful. For my sample piece that I'm sharing with you, I'm going to be using onion skins. But if you're gathering vegetation that's in your locality, please do not strip plants. Be very mindful. Only gather as much as you need. And vegetation that I do recommend, if you don't want to use onion skins, I would recommend rose leaves or blackberry leaves. They usually give very good prints on wool or silk as well in the dirty pot. Not as strong on silk, but they give good prints. So gather your vegetation, then you're going to lay out your bundles. Now, when you're doing that, I would recommend that you squeeze all the water that you've soaked your fabric in, or the vinegar and water solution, you squeeze that until your pieces are damp. I don't go like this and wring the fabric because that's not great for fabric. I actually have a spinner, a top loading little spinner that I can put my fabric in and spin the water out. That works very well. You can use a salad spinner, you know, those big kind of bowls, and then you put a lid on and you turn a handle. That's excellent if your pieces aren't too big. Or if you're having issues with your hands and you can't squeeze it by hand, you can also put your fabric on a clean towel and just roll it up quickly and then unroll it. But you want your fabric to be damp, but you do not want it to be wet. And the reason you want it to be damp is that the fibers will have swollen, for want of a better word, with the overnight soak. And that makes them very much more receptive to absorbing the natural dye color during the eco printing process. Now, if you have the fabric too wet, what's going to happen is you will get prints, you will get color, but what will happen is you will also have color bleeding from the edge of your vegetation and seeping out into whatever you are printing on. So if you are somebody that wants crisp, strong prints, you need to make sure you're working on damp but not wet fabric. And some of you may be saying, well, aside from getting better prints, why would you soak your fabric overnight? If you actually eco print on dry fabric or fabric that hasn't had a good soak, you will also discover that because we're processing for a longer time using the pot as mordant, the dirty pot, you will find that you end up with a lot more creases than if you soaked the fabric beforehand. So I cannot urge you enough to do that. So you lay out your vegetation, you will roll your piece up. You don't have to roll it on a hard inner core. I'm going to show you some slides in a minute of a little felt bag that I printed with onion skins, and I didn't use a core because I wanted to demonstrate that you don't have to. However, I particularly love using metal or copper pipes because you also get modification of color where the pipe is touching the fabric. And for me, that's what I do 95% of the time. But you roll it up and you tie very, very tightly. So if you don't roll up tightly, but you tie tightly, you will get color, you will get prints, but you won't get crisp prints. You need to roll and tie very tightly. And this is where, if you're working on longer lengths of fabric, it's helpful to either put a weight on the opposite end, the end furthest away from you, or have somebody else put their two hands flat on the fabric and vegetation and push down really hard. Don't just hold the edge of a scarf or something because you'll stretch it. Just put your hands flat on it. Get your partner to put the hands flat and really tension it as you roll your piece up. Then you need to pop it into the dirty pot, and the dirty pot needs to be boiling for the best results before you put your piece in. So don't stress that wool or silk is going to shrink from boiling. Trust me, it won't. In the whole time I've been eco printing, I have had one lot of wool distort, but that was due to another way I tied it, not the actual dirty pot itself, because it's wool that I have very successfully eco printed multiple times in the dirty pot. It was to do with silicone tubing that I wrapped it on. And I have had one commercial garment that I bought, a jacket, shrink dramatically in one direction and not the other. But that actually shrank in the washing machine rather than in the dirty pot itself. So it's agitation coupled with heat and changes of temperatures that causes felt or wool or cashmere to shrink. I mean, this here, I'll just show you this again. This cashmere, it's as soft as when I printed it for the first time. This cashmere was boiled for 5 hours in a cast iron pot, and it's perfect. So don't feel that you can't boil it. Just trust me on that. Just go for a boil. And you want to have your pieces submerged fully by the pot liquid. So when you were setting up the dirty pot, I said half fill your pot with water. And the reason for that was we're going to make a strong solution to start with. But when you then come along to eco printing, you want to make sure that all your bundles are totally submerged under the pot liquid. So it may be that you need to top your pot liquid up. And during the process, you want to put your lid on the pot and you want to check it periodically and make sure that you don't need to top it up. A lot of the thicker aluminium or aluminum pots, they're old and they mightn't have a totally flat bottom. So for that reason, I like using a propane, a butane burner, or a wood-fired boiler that I have, because I can get a really good rolling boil, but you need to make sure that those lids fit on top. And then if you're working with onion skins, you can safely take your bundles out after 2 hours. After 2.5 hours, you will have a stronger background color. Let me just show you this cushion again. So when I look at this cushion here, this color down the center is coming from the pot liquid. And if I turn it over to the back, this darker color here is nearer where this particular fabric, where the bundle was tied. But this is not particularly black. I love having my pot liquid very black. And so the darker my pot liquid, like sometimes people say, oh, my pot looks really black. And I'm saying, yeah, good on you. The darker the pot liquid, the more dramatic your prints will be, and the more dramatic the contrast will be. So boil it, make sure your bundles are totally submerged, and then after 2 to 2.5 hours, take out your bundle. There are different lengths of time necessary for different types of vegetation, but really only eucalyptus needs longer than 2.5 hours. So I would say, as a safe bet, if you are experimenting with rose leaves or blackberry leaves, I would say 2 hours and 15 minutes will give you good results. So I don't let my bundles sit in the pot and steep. I like to take them out. And I also haven't found that I get better prints if I leave them for a few days before I open them. So delayed gratification isn't part of what I do. I just wait until the bundles are cold enough to handle, and then I open them up and I reveal the prints. I would say, as a professional, if I'm preparing for an event, maybe in a gallery, like a craft fair in a gallery setting, I will potentially be printing more scarves because they're good sellers. So if I'm printing a batch of scarves and I'm working over a full day, I will usually be tired in the evening, and I will have a selection of bundles. Like, I would mass process them. I want to save energy. I want to save time. I will mass process them. And in that case, I have no problem taking them out of the dirty pot in the evening, and then the following morning opening them, but I don't leave them any longer than that. And just another note for you, because none of this is a race, it's not a competition. You can prepare bundles one day and you can store them overnight, and you can prepare some more bundles the next day, and then you can process them all at the same time. Like, I am trying to be environmentally mindful. I don't want to waste energy or resources. And so if I was preparing bundles, I'm going to leave them overnight, I would just wrap them up in waxed paper. I try to use no plastic in my practice, but sometimes when you're shopping, even if you ask for no plastic, something will come with plastic. So that's a good use of plastic shopping bags, or bags that you bought something and it was in plastic. Pop the bundles in the plastic. In Ireland, our climate isn't dry and hot. So for me, I don't need to put them in the fridge overnight. But if you live in a hotter climate, I would wrap them in either parchment paper or wax paper, or an old plastic bag that you're upcycling, recycling, and pop them somewhere like a fridge, somewhere cool overnight, and they will be absolutely perfect for the following day. So once you have processed them, you need to wash the pieces until your water runs totally clear. That's essential. That's like natural dye 101. Any natural dyeing, you need to wash your pieces until the water runs clear. You do not want to be wearing something that's going to discolor anything you sit on. You don't want it rubbing off on your skin. It's really good practice that what is washing out is not the dye that has been absorbed by your fabric. It's the dye that has not been absorbed by your fabric. So you need to get rid of it. And if you have wrapped or rolled your piece up on an iron pipe or a piece of rusty metal, as well as washing it until the water runs clear, you need to do one other step. You need to neutralize it. And that is just to prevent that rusty metal continuing to have a reaction and eat into your fabric and make it more brittle. So how you would do that is, like, here's a scarf, for example. So this is a silk scarf of mine, and this is very dark. I like dark and moody. So this piece here is a dark and moody scarf, and this was folded up on rusty metal plates. So a silk scarf needs about 1/4 teaspoon of either bicarbonate of soda or baking soda, or we use bread soda here in Ireland. So you would just give it a quick rinse under running water, make a solution of 1/4 teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda and warm water. And then I would soak the scarf for 15 minutes to half an hour before I went on to wash it until the water runs clear. Now, I'm all about saving time, saving energy, being mindful of everything. So it's actually, I use less water and less energy if I batch wash pieces in my washing machine. But I wouldn't combine something that's got very orangey colors with something that's got really dark colors. I would put maybe all the pieces that were wrapped on rusty metal in one wash, and I would put all the pieces that were wrapped, either rolled on themselves or not on rusty metal, in the other wash. So you just wash until the water runs clear, and then you iron your piece to finish it. And this really is the one time I actually really enjoy ironing. So I iron on the hottest setting of the iron, regardless of what my iron says and regardless of the fabric. So everything, whether it's wool, silk, cashmere, or what I'm not actually talking about today, but I also print on cellulose fabric. I also iron linen, ramie, any of those fabrics with the hottest setting of the iron too. So I'll just go back. So the essential things: a reactive pot, rusty metal, fabric that you've washed and prepared correctly, a heat source that can maintain a boil, string. I like to use t-shirt yarn, but it needs to be strong that you can't break if you pull it, vinegar, and suitable vegetation. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you just the process from start to finish, just in a series of slides. And then I'm going to take questions. If anybody has a question, maybe you don't have. And I see this is really lovely. So this is great. I can see people from different parts of the world, and thank you so much for tuning in for this live. And for those of you that are watching on the replay, please just drop a comment under the video afterwards, and I can answer that later on. Okay, so I'm just going to share this series of slides. Now, some of you may have actually seen these before, but many of you may not, because we're a really big international group here. So this is just a very, very simple felt bag that I made and printed to share videos with online participants of a workshop, and also with my EcoPrint and Wet Felt Club. So I decided not to use any metal pipe on this because I wanted to show that you can use, that you can EcoPrint without, but felt is nice and firm. It's easier to roll it up without a pipe inside than it would be if it was a thin piece of silk. So I soaked this simple felt bag overnight in water. I flattened it on my table and I gave it a good sprinkle with vinegar. You can see the vinegar there. I added onion skins and I put a very, very fine sprinkle, possibly of black tea. Maybe I didn't. I don't see any black tea on the table. So I rolled it up really tightly. And if you look carefully under my hands, you can see that there is a leaf under my hands. And I'm putting that leaf under my string. And because the dark pot liquid is going to add natural dye everywhere that's on the outside of the bundle. And this leaf will add added interest. And for this specific piece that I was making, I set up a totally new dirty pot. So this is actually the first time that I'm going to be using this specific pot. It's the aluminium pot. And I just wanted to show what you could achieve after one time. So when I tie my bundles, I make sure then that I leave a length of string that goes from my hand up to my shoulder. The reason for this is I like to be able to tie the bundle onto the handle of my pot, and I make a note of the times that individual bundles go in, and it makes it easier to take them out afterwards. Also, I did say that eucalyptus leaves need longer in the pot at times. So if I'm using eucalyptus leaves, I could tie all those bundles on one handle of the pot. And if I'm using vegetation that needs less time, such as blackberry, rose, or onion skins, I tie them onto the other side. Then I decided I was going to also put these little handles in. So these are really just felt cords that I'm using in this case for the handles of this bag. And if you're a felt maker, I have a tutorial for felt cords on my YouTube channel. So feel free to subscribe to me over on YouTube. I offer plenty of free step-by-step eco printing and wet felting tutorials. So after that was rolled up and tied, so I had the main bag, and I also had the cords, which I'm going to use for handles for the bag. I pop them into the new dirty pot, and then they are processed for 2.5 hours. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the next stage. So here we go. So you can actually see on the table that I also have a bundle, a big bundle on the left-hand side, bottom left-hand side, and that looks really black. So that's what the outside of that pot liquid looked like, or outside of the bundles looked like when they came out of this pot. And as I say, this was the first time using this specific pot. So you can see how dark the pot liquid must have looked if the bundles looked that dark. So as I open the piece, I often get asked, but how can you have paler insides of the bundles if you've such dark liquid? But you'll see as it opens, depending on the thickness of the fabric, what fabric you're working on, and how tightly you tie, you can definitely have pale insides. But I don't want to mask that dark pot liquid. I'm using it as part of my design. So I knew that one side of the bag would have the tie marks. The outside of the bag would have a darker edge on it, and that one side of the bag would be lighter. And this is the side of the bag where the tie marks are. And can you see that curve where it's white at the bottom with the onion skins? That's because if I go back to this bit here, you can see where my hands are. The curve at the bottom of the bag influences the curve at the bottom here. So it's easier if you were here with me for a hands-on workshop, because I could explain that better. But I always like to roll from the widest, flattest piece of my whatever I'm working on up to the narrower piece. And then that curve is an echo of that top narrower curve. And here is the bag washed out and finished. So can you see that if I go back to the previous slide, that dark pot liquid looks really dark there. But when it's washed out and ironed, and I've also reshaped the felt and added the handles, that pot liquid it doesn't look so dark on the bag. And that's because all that extra dark liquid that wasn't absorbed by the felt has now been washed out. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to take a few questions if you have them. And then what I'm going to do is I'll just share, after I've answered a question or two, I'll just share a few images of other pieces of mine that I have printed using onion skins, so that you can see you can achieve different results on different fabrics. Okay, so just remember, if you have a question, please just put a few question marks in front of it, and then I can pick that up easier in the comments. So I see here. So Maria has a question. I'm aiming for some black marks in my dirty pot. Can you explain how I can achieve this? Maria, when you say black marks in the dirty pot, can you just drop another, just be a little more specific and drop me another comment, please? You want the black marks on the fabric. Is it from vegetation or from the pot liquid? Just so that I'm clear where you want the black marks to be. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to answer this question about how can you iron at the end. Well, I literally, if it's a garment, it's obviously easy to iron. I did invest in what's called a sleeve board, and that's really handy. That's kind of a long, thin thing. I'm not sure how many people are used to a sleeve board, but that's really great because it means that if I'm printing something, let's just say a felt bag, I can kind of stick the bag on this narrow bit and I can just iron on top of it. But I can iron totally flat. If it's a vessel or something, I can squash it down and iron it, or I can shape it. I can steam it. But with garments and scarves, it's obvious. You just put them straight onto your ironing board and you just iron them. So let me see. So Maria, I'm still, if it's from the pot liquid, the rusty metal and vegetation is the best way of getting dark colors on your, okay, so the best way of getting dark colors such as lines, let me just see now. Are you talking about dark lines like these ones, Maria? You need, if you don't add copious amounts of vegetation into your dirty pot liquid, if you have rusty metal and vinegar and no vegetation or very little vegetation, the rusty metal and the iron will influence the color of your prints, but you won't get dramatic background color. But if you want that strong, dark color that will color all the outside of your bundle and give you wonderful dark marks under your string, you need to put copious amounts of eucalyptus vegetation into the pot as well. If you want them then to have a browner undertone, you could also add quite a few onion skins after the bundles have gone in the pot. Now, one thing in relation to onion skins, they do something called exhaust. So if you add onion skins to the pot, they release all their color and then they're exhausted. And if you take the onion skins out of the dirty pot liquid after they've cooled down, they will then be almost transparent. I have a large pot, so I just leave the onion skins and the eucalyptus leaves in for, you know, weeks or months on end. But when that pot gets too crowded with vegetation, I take them out. But if you're working with a small pot, I would leave your eucalyptus leaves and maybe bark in for at least 4 sessions. They will continue to release color, but you can remove those exhausted onion skins because they only give color once. I hope that helped, Maria, but if it's not quite clear, just drop another question in. So Chrissy has one. So she wants to get black background with brighter orange cinerea leaves. Okay, so I don't want everyone going wild with this because this is not what I recommend for everybody, but I know that Chrissy has plenty of experience. So Chrissy, what I would do is I would actually, instead of using vinegar to prepare my protein-based fabric, I would get the rind from one pomegranate. I would make up just, it could be fresh or dried. I always just save all my dried pomegranate rinds. And I would make up a pomegranate. I just use the rind from one pomegranate. I would boil it in a saucepan for about an hour. I would put my fabric into it and I would hold it at temperature for about an hour. And then I would let the fabric cool in it. And that will actually dye it. It will make it very tannin rich. And then I would go ahead and I would print with the cinerea leaves, and you'll find you have an extremely black background with the cinerea prints. That's what I think you will discover. But I would also roll it on a rusty metal pipe. So what you're getting in that case is a reaction with the rusty metal and the tannin soaked fabric. You could also try soaking your fabric in a black tea solution beforehand. But I think if you want really dark prints and red from the cinerea, I would go for the pomegranate. Okay. So, okay, here we go. Can you tell me how long you recommend? Yes. This is a very good question. So I actually have a free PDF that's available to download for people who join my newsletter. And I also have a video over on my YouTube channel. I'm just going to see, have I got, I'm just going to type something in here for a second that I can share as a banner. Okay. So my YouTube channel, this is, you'll need to write that down, but youtube.com/c/Clasheen. And if you do a search in the eco printing playlist I have there, you'll be able to find a video that discusses that very subject. And I have over 900 eucalyptus trees planted on my property. And from experience, I know which leaves give really good red prints after 2.5 hours. And I have prepared a PDF file for that. So eucalyptus would include things like eucalyptus parvula, eucalyptus cinerea, Eucalyptus gunnii, named variety Azura. But that downloadable PDF, if you join my newsletter, you can click the link in the description of the video. You can join my newsletter. You can get that free PDF. All of those eucalyptus varieties need 2.5 hours for good prints. However, when I try and experiment with a new eucalyptus variety, I would always boil it for 5 hours for the first time. And if I don't get good prints after 5 hours, that is not a variety that I will continue to print with. If I get good prints after 5 hours, I will then reduce the time the next time I use it, and I keep coming backwards. But many eucalypts don't release their red dye until after 4 hours in the pot. So there is no way of knowing unless somebody like me has experimented. All eucalyptus will give some color, but some may be just very dull brown. And I also find that I have certain eucalyptus varieties that give different color depending on how much rain we have had recently. So the acidity of the soil, the growing conditions, they make a really big difference to the prints you can get. And the tree in particular here, it is Eucalyptus archery. That's also called the cider gum. Those leaves give not the most interesting prints after 2.5 hours, subtle as a background to other eucalyptus prints, but after heavy rain, they go to a rich plummy purple color with very strong greeny gold. So they are wonderful after rain. I always make sure to use them after rain. So I hope that helped answer that question. So let me see now. Yeah, you're welcome, Chrissy. I just don't say that to everybody because unless you understand what you're doing in relation to using the like of the pomegranate, people will just get results that they're not expecting. Okay, so Lisa is saying, now I have to go and buy some secondhand brown cords to go with future prints. Absolutely. Yeah, Lisa, brown, I have all sorts of different shades of brown. And in fact, I don't know if you can see, I'll take that off the screen. I'm wearing brown linen today, dark brown linen today. And I love upcycling things. So this top that I'm wearing, this was a $1, one Australian dollar top that I got when I was facilitating a retreat on Lake Macquarie in Australia, pre-lockdown. And the leaves you can see didn't give really fantastic prints, but all these little splodges, these are all splodges from the reaction of tannin from the petiole of the leaf. That's a little stem or where the leaf was off, cut from the whatever vegetation it was. And I like these abstract prints as well. Any more questions, drop them in the comments. I'm going to show you just a few onion skin slides now. And then I'm going to call it quits. But I just have these beside me just to show you as well. So again, on my YouTube channel, of course, I eco-print cellulose fabric. These are a pair of my own trousers. These were done in the dirty pot. And just because they were done in the dirty pot does not mean you have to end up with a really dark background. It just depends on what you do. These had a 40-second soak in rust water, and I printed them with wild blackberry leaves. That's where the back of the leaf made contact with the fabric. This is where the front did. And then these really funky, abstract sort of lines, they are coming from the seed pod of rose bay willow herb. So again, over on my YouTube channel, you will find how to make your homemade rust water, and you'll also find videos about how to use that on cellulose fabric. So the last thing I'd like to share now, I'm going to share this little series of slides before I sign off. This just shows, using onion skins, that different fabric looks different depending on the, even when you use the same vegetation. So it depends on the pipe it's rolled on and the pot. So this first piece, this is a highly textured Nuno felt scarf, eco-printed with onion skins, only onion skins. And there were loads of onion skins and some eucalyptus leaves in the pot liquid. So you can see that the background is a pale white color. You can see that the tie marks are very obvious down at the bottom. And I folded this slightly on a diagonal so that the tie marks were flattering to the wearer. Now, I have to say that Maya, who's modeling there for me, could wear anything. But do think you want your tie marks to, to flatter, if it's clothing, you want them to flatter the person who's going to be wearing it. And then this silk scarf that she's wearing underneath a raw fleece wrap that I felted, those were onion skins on a silk satin, a heavy 12.5 mame silk, and they were rolled on a copper pipe. So they're a softer, warmer orange. Here are onion skins on a matte silk upcycle top, and there was some rusty metal in the pot, but almost none, and there was no vegetation in the pot to give dark color. So you can see down the middle and in all sorts of other areas, there's no dark bands of color on this piece, and that's because there wasn't the addition of that vegetation in the pot. And there was plenty of vegetation in the pot for this. This is a silk, or in fact, it's organza, not chiffon. I say chiffon, but actually it's organza scarf that I got some of these from Marion in Australia, Marion of Beautiful Silks. And these have got cotton dots woven into the silk. And when you print chiffon or organza, it's very light and airy. So the prints are not necessarily quite as obvious, but I can see the prints. And if you look here, can you note how the cotton dots haven't absorbed the natural dye? And that's why you need to understand that when you are working without traditional powdered mordants, the best thing to start with is the protein-based fabric, because the cellulose fabric needs rust water or some other treatment before it's receptive to taking the dye and prints. And I like to play around with that. So that's why I love the fact that the cotton dots here haven't absorbed the color so much. So they look a much paler color than the actual scarf itself. And as I say, if this scarf was in your hand, you would see that there are actually prints on it, but it just looks more abstract because of the lighter nature of the fabric. Here are onion skins on felt, and you can see the vibrancy of this piece. You can also see there's a mirror image going across the center. Where the onion skin print on the bottom right is a little bit paler and yellower than the onion skin print, its mirror image on the top. That's because the outside piece of the onion skin, let me just remove this for 1 second. So let's say this is the onion. The curve, that outside curve, if you have that piece of the onion skin on your fabric, it gives a stronger print than if the inner bit of the curve was on the onion skin. And that's what's happening here. So make sure to put onion skins, some of them up and some of them down. And then here we have, this is a collaboration I've done with a wonderful Greenwood furniture maker called Alison Ospina. And I have printed fabric and Alison has made furniture. We actually have some on exhibition at the moment here in Ireland. But it's wonderful doing a collaboration with somebody. And what I find really fascinating, the prints, when I send Alison fabric, the prints that I feel are the absolute best prints on a piece of fabric are actually usually not the ones that she emphasizes in the piece. So I find it really interesting. So it just shows that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I can guarantee that if you think your prints are too dark and you think everything is a bit on the edgy side, too dark, I can guarantee those are the ones I'm going to like the best. And some of the ones that are significantly paler, maybe the ones that you like the best. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Any last minute questions, just drop them in now. I do have a Facebook group, a public group, and that's the link for the group. If any of you are interested in joining, please just request to join, answer the questions. And that's for people who are interested in wet felting and eco printing in the dirty pot. It's where we share ideas, we offer advice, we help each other. It's not for sharing images of work done using traditional powdered mordants, but people who use traditional powdered mordants are very, very welcome to join the group and just, you know, watch along and decide whether you'd like to try working without. So I just would like to say thank you so much. I'm really happy for those people who have enjoyed it. I'm afraid I don't know your names, but thank you so much. This Global Botanical Print Day is absolutely wonderful, and I have enjoyed my participation very much. I'm looking forward to watching all the other live streams on replay, and it's just been an absolute pleasure. If you are watching this on replay yourself, please just leave me any questions as a comment, and I will be happy to answer them as soon as I can. So I will leave things on that. I will just say over and out from Clasheen. I look forward to welcoming some of you into that Facebook group. Please feel free to request to join and enjoy the rest of Global Botanical Print Day. Thank you.